A decision on whether to allow human cloning for medical research has been put off. The government says it's delaying a response which had been expected today because of public concerns. But it's reaffirmed its total ban on full-scale human cloning, calling it unacceptable. Here's our science reporter, Pallab Ghosh.
Ever since the creation of Dolly the cloned sheep, there have been worries that the technology could lead to the cloning of a human being. The government has always said that this is banned, but last year 2 advisory bodies said that there should be limited research into human cloning to develop new treatments.
If you have a child dying of burns and you could transplant skin, which you'd grown in the laboratory using this technique, as I think is extremely likely in a few years' time, that would seem to be a moral imperative to do that.
The idea is to take a DNA sample from the patient and transfer it into an empty human egg. A mild electric current then stimulates the cell to divide and grow, creating a human embryo. Chemical nutrients added to these cells then become tissue, such as skin or muscle, for transplant. Scientists had hoped that the government would have given such research the go-ahead by now, but today the Department of Health announced that it would need more time to make up its mind because of public concerns.
It's very, very important. People have very strong views about some of these issues because of the ethical matters that underlie them, and it's very, very important before we move forward that we do so on the basis of good public understanding and public support.
Pro-life and religious groups are particularly worried about the morality of using human embryos.
Sick patients will be persuaded to manufacture tiny twin and triplet copies of themselves, and then those tiny twin and triplet copies will be destroyed deliberately as they're converted into transplantable tissues.
Scientific advice is often rubber-stamped by ministers, but because of the controversy surrounding human cloning, the government has preferred to put off deciding on whether to allow further research into the area. Pallab Ghosh, BBC News.
Ruth Deach is the chairman of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, one of the groups which has been advising the government on cloning. Ruth Deach, thank you for joining us. This is a bit of a fudge, isn't it, from the government's point of view? The tough question was always the use of cloning for medical research, and they haven't really given us an answer.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think this is a very constructive response and one that we welcome at the HFEA. We're glad to see that the government has confirmed its confidence in us as a regulatory body willing and ready to stop any reproductive cloning, that is cloning of babies. That's very satisfactory. We're also content that the principle that there might be research in the future into the use of stem cells coming from cloned embryos is being further explored. We think it's right to get more detail on this. We put forward the principle, we did the consultation, and we're glad to know that scientists will look at this and take this matter forward.
But Ruth, do you think there's enough information out there at the moment for the government to have made a decision? I mean, presumably you've been advising them on this.
Yes, we advise them that the door should be kept open to a change in the law to allow this sort of research. It's a very fast-moving area. The advantages that we see now may not be the advantages that are seen in 2 or 3 years' time. I think there's nothing wrong with the acceptance of the principle and some filling out of the detail of the advantages and maybe disadvantages of this sort of research. But we have moved forward, I think, in a constructive way and a responsible way. Anything that happens in this field will be monitored constantly, and we will all ensure that it is acceptable to the public and indeed that it's all legal and the right thing to do.